Helo, shwmae. Una Lloyd ydw i. Dwi'n rhan o'r tîm ymarfer da o'r Swyddfa Archwilio Cymru. Croeso cynnes I chi. Hello, good afternoon. My name's Una Lloyd. I'm part of the Good Practice team in the Wales Audit Office in Cardiff. It's a lovely afternoon in Cardiff for a webinar on governance. So it's not governance as we know it, but it's governance in terms of supporting improvement across public service delivery. Now, this is the first in the series of the webinars. Mae'r doi person mwyaf bwysig tu ôl y camera bore yma, so prawn yma. Mae Dyfrig, mae Bethan, helo y ddoi chi. Fydd Dyfrig a Bethan yn helpu ni ynglyn â'r e-bost ydych chi'n gobeithio bydd ni cael o'r ddech chi heddi. So Dyfrig and Bethan are sitting behind the cameras. They're the two most important people because they'll be receiving any observations you care to make and also any questions you care to pose to us. Because actually, you're part of the webinar. We perform might be here in Cardiff, but we have a massive delegate list out there. So I wonder who you are. Let me give you a bit of a flavour to who's actually out there listening in this morning. So be prepared for a long list. So we've got some health bodies. We've got both officers and non-execs. We've got local authority officers, housing bodies, police, national parks, devolved bodies in Wales, such as Natural Resources Wales, National Assembly for Wales, FE and HE colleges, Welsh Government officials, many trustees. And we've got some Audit Office colleagues from Northern Ireland and Ireland. Good afternoon to you folks. We've also got colleagues from Swyddfa, Police and Crime Commissioners' offices, and Swyddfa Commissioner the Gymraeg. Now, mae croeso cynnes I chi anfon cwestiynau drwy gyfrwng Cymraeg neu Saesneg sy'n mot ffordd, ond sut ydych chi'n neud hynny? You're very welcome to send questions through the medium of English or Welsh. So how do you do that? Quite simple. An email address. It's good.practice@audit.wales. Or if you Twitter, there's a particular hashtag you can pick it up on. If you send your questions or observations in against this particular hashtag, which is WAOGov17, we'll pick those up if that's okay. Now, I am very aware a number of you have not listened into a webinar before. So as I said at the beginning of the webinar, you're actually part of it. So please feel free to send in any questions or observations you may have to the email address or on Twitter that I've just mentioned. And just to reassure you, it's the question you have is really important. Some people feel uncomfortable sending in a question, thinking, oh, I don't want to be identified with that question. Genuinely, your question is really important to us. We guarantee your anonymity. Oh, gosh, I got that word right. I always struggle with that word, so I'm not going to say it again. So please feel free to send in your questions. Because the bottom line is, if you're thinking it, there's a huge chance other people are as well. So without further ado, I think it's time I introduce the panel. So, hello David, how are you? Would you care to introduce yourself to the delegates listening in?
Certainly would. For a hand up, good afternoon everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is David Richards. I am the Director of Governance for the Welsh Government. That means that I advise ministers and the organisation and often the rest of the public service on issues about governance, accountability, audit, and the like. And I spend some of my time going around talking to public bodies about these things. And I've also been the chair of an arm's length body myself in the past. I was the chair of the UK Intellectual Property Office.
Lovely. David, thank you. Very welcome. Thank you. Hello, Ross.
Hello, Bethan. Oh, you know,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, the couple ladies behind
yes, of course. Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Ross Campbell. I'm a director at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. I'm responsible for our public sector work, which I lead. That covers all aspects of public sector activity, including everything from fiscal sustainability through accountability, through good governance and professionalism. I'm a former civil servant. I worked for the UK MOD and the Treasury for about 10 years, and I bring that experience to my work now.
Lovely, thank you. Very welcome, Ross. Thank you. Hello, Alistair.
Hello, I'm Alistair McQuaid. I work for the Wales Audit Office. I've been a performance improvement and value for money auditor in various guises since the mid-1990s. I recently drafted a paper for the Auditor General, looking at the governance challenges associated with indirectly provided publicly funded services. And over the years, I've done pieces of work, generally where things have gone wrong, I have to say, rather than necessarily where things have gone well. And hopefully we'll be focusing much more on sharing good practice during the course of this discussion.
Thank you, Alistair. It's really strange asking a colleague of yourself to introduce yourself because you actually know them. So before I get Alistair to share sort of why we're holding this webinar, two things to remind you. You can send your questions in anytime. Don't wait until I say to you, right, let's have your questions in on this. So just to remind you, the email address is good.practice@audit.wales. We've already had quite a few questions in from people who are not able to listen in live. So rest assured, if you want to get yours in, get them in now because we've got a stack coming in already. Just remember what Alistair just said. Today is about moving forward. So today's a series, first in the series of webinars, and we'll be looking to you for feedback. Where next after this webinar today? So have a think about during the course of this hour. What would helpfully help you in terms of trying to help with this really complex topic of governance on arm's length bodies? So, Alistair.
Right, why we thought this was a good idea. Basically, we recognise that the public service landscape is changing very considerably. It's changing, and the pace of change is also increasing. And that presents a number of challenges, not least because the way in which services are procured and delivered increasingly involves a variety of different bodies, some public, some private, some third sector. And because of that, our understanding of what the public sector is, what public money is, who public servants are, those, what we regard as being commonly understood terms, when you actually start unpacking them, they're much more ambiguous. And that presents governance challenges. And where you have uncertainty, you also have risk. You have differences in expectations. And the public service ethos, which we all cherish, doesn't necessarily translate easily into a commercial environment and into the drivers that the private sector would recognise. So we recognise that there are some tensions. Now, we don't have all of the answers. We recognise what has gone wrong in the past. We recognise some of the challenges that are there for the future. But we want to create a community of practice and draw on all of the expertise and knowledge that exists out there in actually encouraging a positive debate to help move things forward. So that's why we're doing this webinar today. And that's why we have a programme of further webinars, which Ian has referred to, and also a good practice exchange event early next year, all focused around moving the agenda forward and helping to identify how people can learn from each other.
Alistair, thank you. Thanks very much. So, folks, for those of you who've not listened in before, I'm now going to pose the first question to the panel. I've got some questions already I want to pose to them that have come in. But if you have any, start sending them in now. And there's some, Bethan's nodding me, we've already got some coming in. Okay, so make sure you get your questions in, folks. What I'll try to do very quickly, because as the panel members are speaking, if I'm seeing some questions that are similar, I'll try and brigade them together, if that's all right. So, David, without further ado, I'm going to read out the first question, if I may, if that's all right. So the first question I want to pose to the panel is this. Public, private and third sectors have become increasingly intertwined in public service delivery. Recognising the diversity and dynamism of Welsh public services provision, why is it so important to have good governance arrangements in place?
Right, thank you, Ian. Well, I think the first thing to say is this diversity of delivery is a good thing. We shouldn't regard this as a problem. It gives greater opportunities to have public services delivered by the people in the organisation who are in the best place and with the best experience to deliver it. So the more we have a diverse delivery field, the more we're able to kind of target the delivery aim. So in the end, the outcome has got to be good. as Alistair said, there's some things don't change. And one of the things that doesn't change with the complicated landscape is the basic public sector principles, or the fact that we are looking after taxpayers' money. None of us are spending our own money, we're spending money on behalf of the public. That comes with it responsibilities, not just about rules and processes, but that means a responsibility as well to make sure that the money gets applied properly and used properly to deliver outcomes. So really good governance doesn't get in the way of delivery. Really good governance helps you balance achieving your outcomes and living up to the values which anybody involved in public service is obliged to live up to. And we can do this. As long as we keep it simple, as long as we keep focusing on outcomes and keep focusing on being value-driven organisations, then we can work our way through the complexity.
The point they said about outcomes is really important, and I've got some couple of questions coming in now about that, so I'm giving you the heads up that that's happening, if that's okay. Thanks, David. Ross, can I come to you on that one, if that's okay?
Yes, I mean, I agree completely with David. I think really good governance actually helps provide clarity. It provides clarity about purpose and objectives, how to apply principles of public sector service and service provision, but also how to apply resources to achieve the right outcomes. Governance is much more than about rules. It's about provision of clarity on roles and responsibilities, on boundaries, on whether they're contractual or otherwise. I think at its best, it's a means of helping resolve conflict, resolve issues, and actually managing the risk and the unexpected that always happens with the delivery of complex services. And my goodness me, that's one thing that the public sector is. It's actually far more complex than being in business.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Thanks very much for that, Ross. Alistair, would you like to bring this part, your thoughts on this?
Sure, yeah. Really echoing what the others have said, that governance in a very complicated landscape provides a kind of compass, if you like, to steer a course through that complexity. And it's very important that from a Wales Audit Office perspective that we have ourselves a very good understanding of what good looks like, because otherwise we've got nothing to audit against. And so it's important that expectations are clear, whether that's the expectations of those who are overseeing services, those who are making decisions within those services and providing those services, those who are receiving services, and also those like us who are looking at how well all that has been done by others. So really that's why we need to have a common understanding, and hopefully this kind of discussion will help us to, over a period of time, arrive at greater clarity in what is a very complicated and also changing arena.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to give a shout out now, if I may. What's happening out there? Are you doing some different stuff that maybe you would be helpful for us to know about, that we can share? Because if there are stuff, if you are doing some interesting approaches in relation to arm's length governance, please let us know. We'll blog about it afterwards. So if that is the case, to send it to the same email I talked to you about, which is good.practice@audit.wales. Guys, just to give you a heads up, we've got 2 or 3 questions coming in relation to SD and WFG. David, can I come to you on this one? How can the public sector use the framework of the WFG Act, the Wellbeing of the Future Generations Act? They're talking about the 5 ways of working here as an enabler to help them adapt and change to more complex delivery and improvement models. Before I come to you, David, I'm aware there's some people who are listening outside Wales, from Ireland and England. Just to let everybody know, we have an act unique to Wales, so it'd be helpful if you just shared that as well before you go into response. I'll just give you the question again to give you a bit of time to have a think about it. Sorry, don't give them much time, do I? So how can the public sector use the framework of the WFG Act in relation to the 5 ways of working as an enabler to help them adapt and change to more complex delivery and improvement models? And as I said, is it helpful? Could you just introduce the WFG Act as well, bearing in mind? Okay, thank you.
Well, for people listening outside Wales, the National Assembly felt that the principles of sustainable development, in the broadest sense, we're not just talking here about environmentalism, but about taking a long-term view of things, looking after all of the resources, using them properly for the future. It was so important that they want to put in legislation and put an obligation on public service bodies in Wales to go about their business in accordance with principles. We have appointed a commissioner to oversee, comment, work on this. And the Wales Audit Office are the statutory auditors as well, so that the Wales Audit Office will be coming round and working very closely with bodies, because I know that their approach is to, I've got to say this is their webinar, but it's true. But it's true, their approach is to work with the bodies to audit this. I like the way this question has been phrased, because it says, effectively, how can we make this an opportunity? And I think the first thing is exactly this. This is not a problem. This is an opportunity to do things better and to look towards the future. I think there are two, in my experience, talking to bodies, what I've seen, I have seen two kind of polar opposites of attitudes, neither of which are good. One is which is, I don't know where to start. I can kind of understand that, but we can do this. But the other one, even more dangerous attitude, is, oh, we're doing all this already. Because nobody is. You know, when you look at it, there is a lot that we can do. But we're not going to do this overnight, is the first thing. So none of us must expect, you know, to fix this by Tuesday week. So all of us involved in this need to keep talking to each other, talking to the Wales Audit Office, talking to the Commissioner, who is very, you know, the door is very open to conversations about this. So we got to learn from each other. We've got to expect this to be a journey, and we've got to keep it simple. If we are not careful, this will turn into a mammoth paper chase around rules and regulations, and the intention is certainly not there. So an awful lot of focus, an awful lot of simplifying, and an awful lot of conversations is going to make this work.
Okay, David, there's a couple of supplementaries coming in relation to, since you've been speaking, in terms of how we should work, or the method we should be following in relation to the WFG Act and governance. And I'm going to sort of suggest at this stage, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. There isn't just a standard approach that I'm seeing from my perspective. So would you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think if anybody does have the right approach and method out there, can they please send it to us? Because in the Welsh Government, we're still trying to work it out.
Okay.
So I don't think anybody's cracked this. Okay. But everybody's got ideas, and there's lots of good practice and good thinking we can put together.
Okay. Ross, did you want to come in on that one?
No, I think this is absolutely fantastic, and it's Wales leading the way, actually, because I don't think there's anything like this in any other part of the United Kingdom. And I think
in the world, actually.
Well, indeed, I think it is hugely valuable to have a set of guiding principles, which is what I think the Act provides, that allow you to step back from the day-to-day detail and say, actually, what's the big picture? What are we actually doing this for? Why are we doing it?
Okay.
And I think that leads to a better sense of perspective.
Okay. Okay, lovely. Ross, there's a question that's coming in for you, actually. I'm just going to roll it back up. How can we encourage learning from across different sectors to consider different models of governance and delivery? Now, you wear a hat that covers England and Wales.
Yes,
yeah?
indeed.
So sort of that would be helpful just to see what's happening over the border as well, if that's okay, yeah?
Well, I mean, I'm enormously privileged in that my role is actually a global one, and I get to travel pretty much everywhere there are chartered accountants, which is about 160 countries. I haven't been to all of them. I've only been to about a dozen. But that gives me a tremendous opportunity to contrast and compare and see what other people are doing in other places. I've also been very privileged in my career to work in both private and public sectors. And I think as a consequence, what I would really say is that the best way to encourage learning is to experience it for yourself.
Okay.
And if you can get some shared experience, whether it's by secondments, whether it's by working closely with contractors, embedding people into governance structures, that mutual understanding is actually what really helps improve governance and delivery.
And what kind of roles were you thinking about there? Are there particular roles within an organisation that would help them?
Yes, I think there are. I mean, you know, we've looked increasingly at blended public-private delivery.
Okay.
And I think sometimes one needs to be careful not to disturb contractual relationships.
Yes.
But the presence of public sector people on boards of delivery organisations sometimes can be a great way of actually starting to understand both motivations and what's really behind the delivery dynamic.
Okay. I'm going to pose that question back to some of the delegates, because I'm aware there's quite a few board members and trustees out there. Any thoughts on what Ross has just said there? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, if that's okay. Again, same email, good.practice@audit.wales. Alistair, do you want to come back on that as well?
Just going back to the WFG, I think it's important to recognise that the WFG Act isn't something separate from good governance. It's not an additional burden. There are aspects of it that require changes in culture, particularly in the public sector. But it's really embedding a lot of things that really should be there anyway. So you've got good governance should ensure that an organisation continues on into the future, it looks ahead, and the WFG Act actually helps to sort of move things in that direction. It also should help with a kind of culture shift for public bodies, looking forward, looking at prevention, from simply looking at how they spend their annual budget and administration. So it should be that shift from administration to management, thinking more about how resources are used, a longer term view. So all of those things are actually inherent in good governance, but they're made explicit within the WFG Act.
Okay, Alistair, thank you. There's several questions coming in. Obviously, WFG is pushing the buttons for people. So I've got about 6 or 7 questions in. I'm going to pose this one question to capture it all, if that's all right. If there's any other supplementaries following the responses, please get it in. So the question is, when the Commissioner, that's Sophie Howe, spoke to an Assembly committee, she said she didn't want the Act to be a box-ticking exercise, but rather a change of culture. Well, this is the next bit I think is fascinating. But how does one have smart targets for culture? How can one audit compliance with a change of culture? It's that you're talking from the range of looking at someone who's compliant through to being sort of strategic, aren't you, in that respect? So I'll just repeat the question once again to give you guys some time to think about it. Some great questions coming in here, folks. Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm smiling.
Somebody send in an easy one.
Okay, right. Let me just repeat that question once again slowly. When the Commissioner, Sophie Howe, spoke to an Assembly committee, she said she didn't want the Act to be a box-ticking exercise, but rather a change of culture. But how does one have smart targets for culture? How can one audit compliance with a change of culture? That is a great question, folks. And I am not trying to cover up the panel here. I don't think this is a 2-minute answer here, but I'm going to ask them to have a go at it, because I think this is going to be something that you're going to commit to a blog, I think, as well, guys. But I'd like some initial thoughts on that, if that's okay. David, can I come to you first? I'm going to come to all 3 of you in turn, if I may, if that's all right. That's okay, thank you.
I think this is one of those issues you can only address actually through a basket of indicators. So I think you can't rely on one simple target to get there. You can't rely on all measurable targets. Some of these issues can be seen but not measured. Some of the stuff like stats surveys, stakeholder surveys will give you some hard information which you can pull in. Some of it is going to be just an agreement by the not just by the organisation itself, but by the people who deals with regulators to say, actually, yeah, you know, it's different since they started working on these principles. There's a different feel to the organisation. And even if you can't quantify that, I think that's a valid piece of evidence to put in. So for me, you don't rely on one bit of evidence, you don't rely on one kind of evidence, but you rely on a basket of indicators. And if you just put them out in front of you on the table, and look at them. It's like looking into a pool after you've thrown a stone into it. Gradually the ripples go away and you see there's a message here.
Okay. Thanks for the thought, David. I think there's a need for us, though, to have a think about trying to get some fuller thoughts and thinking, once you've had time to think about it, and put it in by blog. So, gentlemen, I am publicly committing to a blog on this one, because obviously it's a topic that's that the delegates have got concerns about, and so we need to help that in the fullness of time. Right, okay. Aros, can I come to you?
Culture, I mean, culture, the way we do things here, roughly, it's one of those things that's so hard to legislate for.
Yeah.
You can't make rules to essentially control how people think about things. But where maybe rulers can't rule, leaders can certainly lead. And I think cultural change is very much about leadership and the right tone being set and the right behaviours being rewarded, and behaviours that aren't consistent not being tolerated as the other side of that coin. And I think one can observe those changes, and when people understand that the tone has changed, that actually that if you're doing something that contributes towards the right sort of working environment, cultural environment, that is recognised, then you start to deliver the change.
I mean, culture isn't an independent that independently of an organisation's purpose, the quality of its services. You know, it's very much something that impacts on all of those things, but it's not something you can measure independently of them. So by looking at those things, it gives you an idea of how effective the organisation's culture is. But it's not something that you can look at really trying to examine as a thing. So I think you look at the impacts of culture rather than necessarily culture itself, I think.
Okay, Alistair, thank you. But again, I'm going to ask you folks out there, because as Alistair said earlier on, we're looking to develop a community, a virtual community of people of good practice, or a community to help support moving this topic forward. Is there anything happening out there that you'd want to share with us? Has someone sort of resolved this really tricky nub of an issue in terms of looking at the SMART targets and sort of not being tick box? Anyone started that journey? And you know, as we said earlier on, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You know, what works for one may not work exactly for the other because of the sort of the DNA of the organisation. Would you like to share with us if you're doing something interesting? We might include it in the blog if it's pertinent. So again, email that in on good.practice@audit.wales. Gents, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on to thank you for your questions. Keep coming them in. Don't wait until I give the shout out. Bring them in, and I'm going to try and group them together because clearly your folks have got some comments to make here. David, can I come to you for the second question, if I may? Thanks. So the second question is, in your experience, what has been the most common challenges facing public services in relation to governance? And are there, and this is the most important bit, are there any examples of approaches that would take them to overcome that? So the most common ones, and what approaches have they would have to overcome? I'm looking for some thoughts on that, if that's David.
One of the examples that always come in my head when I hear questions like this is an organisation, very big organ, not mine, very big public service organisation, and they actually had two sets of governance. They had the one which was written down, which was brilliant, you know, delegations, rules, absolutely terrific. If the Wales Audit Office came in and actually audited the framework, it was excellent. And then they had another governance framework, which is what actually happened in the organisation. It bore no resemblance to what was actually the rules meant to say, and you don't want to be like that. So simply saying one thing and doing another is often a problem that organisations wrestle with. I think that ambiguity is the second problem, that things are left vague, not actually nailed down, not really clear who takes decisions, who does what in the organisation. And I think sometimes things get put into place on grounds of expediency rather than the sustainable development principles of looking at the long term. So, and then the third thing is complexity. Lots of organisations have simply got too many processes and too many rules. And the more processes and rules you have, the more chance there is that people will start working their way around them. Every organisation have the least possible rules you can possibly have, but the deal is that everybody follows them. And then the next thing is not focus on outcomes, what we're really here to do. Good governance makes you think on what you're trying to achieve, what's the end game, and keep that in mind. And the last thing for boards is a lack of an edge. Lack of an edge. A lot of the boards that I work with and talk to and visit are great and highly committed and brilliant, but they're not challenging enough. Executives, they will often say, okay, well, I know that, you know, it's an easier life with a board that doesn't challenge me, but actually I would prefer my non-executives to be asking harder and deeper questions.
Okay, I've got to come back to you and to talk about his edge. So can you give me a sort of, in reality, what that mean? Sort of, let's put that.
Sure, it means a critical frame. It's a particular skill being a non-executive. I was surprised, having been a civil servant for a long time, then I became a non-executive chair. I was surprised that I had a little completely different skill set. And it's getting the balance between supporting the organisation and working for its best, but not getting captured.
Oh, right, okay, fine. That's a good ending now. Thank you, David. Thank you. Okay, Ross, can I come to you on this one?
Yes, certainly. Well, one of my backgrounds was I spent some time about 10 years ago trying to fix the Ministry of Defence's PFI programme, which was something of a challenge, as I'm sure you can imagine. But actually, it was an awful lot of the things that David has just mentioned. It was a set of written down rules that were actually far too complex and involved for anybody ever to adhere to, that drove ambiguity because people actually tried to work around them, institutional uncertainty as a consequence, and all sorts of fixes, with very often things being done for expediency because the minister wanted it, and often to heroic deadlines, which meant we're just not conducive for actual sort of safe contractual practice. And the institution was actually almost paralyzed because what it had lost was a clear framework where people were encouraged to actually take measured risks and exercise their judgment, and trying to get people in that institution to exercise their judgment about sensible management of risks, as opposed to trying to work out how to game the system, was the biggest challenge I faced. And I think, how do we tackle that? Well, we absolutely keep things simple, but we absolutely live up to the rules that we set when we've set them, and we make them work.
Okay. Both you and David are talking about walking the talk here. That's what I'm hearing now. Alistair, before I come to you, there's a couple of questions coming in about the culture and WFG. There's only a part of the question coming through. Can whoever sent that email, can you re-email it to me, please? Because I'm not sure if you realise you've missed the last bit of the question out, if that's okay. Thank you.
Common challenges. I mean, things like something that was done for a particular purpose, then being given other responsibilities and being used for something else. So a lack of clarity about its direction, core purposes, the fact that it's doing something it was never intended to do and wasn't set up properly for, clear oversight and an understanding about the difference between oversight and intervention, but nevertheless knowing when to intervene. Management of conflict of interest, that's a particular issue that is growing in prominence as you have different bodies involved in both supply chain and delivery chains. So it's those sort of issues that I think are the sort of thorny challenges going forward that any governance framework needs to address.
And have you got some ideas and approaches that potentially they could think about?
Well, that's partly why we're here, but
recognising there's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
I think there's, I think that's the point, that that there isn't a one-size-fits-all. There are approaches that we can draw upon, things that we can learn from, but the key thing, I think, is together to move towards a shared understanding that is applicable to the particular circumstances that we're looking at, and a lot of approaches tend to be either principles-based or rules-based. And the problem with principles is that you can always find exceptions to them and where they shouldn't apply. And the problem with rules is that you can't always foresee the circumstances in which they may well be necessary, so they can't cater for everything. So you end up with going back to what we were saying earlier, differences in understanding about whether things do or don't apply, and you get ambiguity, uncertainty, risk, and so forth.
Okay. So thank you. Thanks for that. Before I come in, we've got some more questions coming in. Thank you for your questions, folks. But let me ask you the question. Have you had some challenges from a governance point of view that you've overcome and you're willing to share? Please email them in to us. They'd be lovely to hear that, if that's okay. So, David, I'm afraid it's, I'm sorry.
Bring it on.
Yeah, okay. Right, so ready for this? How can public bodies meaningfully involve people receiving services now and in the future in the design and the delivery of future services, building on their personal experiences and expertise in defining the problems that the services are looking to tackle and identifying the assets available to develop new solutions? I'm just going to say that slowly again, okay? So how can public bodies meaningfully involve people who receive services now and in the future in the design and delivery of future services, building on their personal experiences and expertise in defining the problems that the services are looking to tackle and identifying the assets available to develop a new solution or solutions?
Yeah, really good question. In my view, there's no magic bullet. There is no single solution or app, that is going to solve this. You have to address it through a number of different ways. The first thing is you've got to be willing to listen. I think if we give you another example, I worked at AM with another major public body, really proud of the way they worked with stakeholders. And when I went to do work with the board and do governance and truth, we work with our stakeholders. We take our stakeholders and partners really seriously, and we work with them very hard and give them lots of respect. Great. So then I went and talked to stakeholders and partners, and they didn't feel that at all. They felt kind of marginalised and left out. And the body said, well, we have our stakeholders around the table. And the stakeholders said, yeah, but we're always at the bottom of the table, and we get brought in right at the end. Would our colleagues like to say something? So you've got to be honest with yourself. Is the first thing, and you've got to be prepared to listen. And stakeholder engagement isn't a process that you go through. It's a listening exercise is the first thing. And you've got to, again, as I was saying about the indicators, you've got to have a basket of approaches. You've got to have some formal consultations, depending on if you're doing stakeholder surveys, and really good. We do a regular stakeholder survey in the Welsh Government. People give grants to see what they think of the service, and that's really helpful. But you've got to have people actually around the table for meetings, and you've got to listen to them and not patronise them. And you've got to be prepared to change. And take these things seriously. Sometimes when you're being engaged from the outside as stakeholders, a recipient, a service recipient, you get so far, and then the organisation feels, well, this is all just getting a little bit challenging now, we're going to stop there, because this is going to be uncomfortable as well. We will all hear things that we don't want to hear when we talk and listen to people at the end of our services.
Very honest answer. Thank you, David. Much appreciated. And actually, it's true. It's not a process. It's about the people. And yeah, if I can, thank you. I've got a couple more questions coming in, a couple of observations. I'm going to have a quick read of them. If you'd like to share your thoughts on that question, got some high-level stuff you'd like to bring on that one.
I think involving stakeholders is an absolutely critical part of success in just about anything you do. But it's something that management always struggles very, very much with. And it's one of those things where I don't think there is a single answer. I think you've got to try stuff out and work out what balance works for everybody. But one thing is necessary to facilitate that, and that's open and honest communication. And the more you have of that, the better your stakeholder relations and management and feedback will be.
If I was listening in now, and we're used to a culture where sort of we get given a set of rules, guidance to follow, I'm hearing a very clear message here that going forward, there isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's just going to be a shift for people expecting to have sort of, well, here's the guidance to follow, go do it. There isn't going to be one set of guidance. It's going to be depending. I'm hearing it's dependent on. I'm hearing a lot of that expression today. Would that be fair, Alistair?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the transportability and applicability of what we're trying to use. There's a lot of approaches to customer service are brought from the private sector, where people have a choice, they can vote with their feet.
Yeah.
What we're dealing with here is very often services where people don't have a choice whether they have that service or not. They don't have a choice of who they go to for that service. And so those kind of approaches are really of very limited use. But the digital age provides a lot of opportunities for harvesting huge amounts of information about how people receive services, whether they value those services, whether those services are delivering outcomes or not. And public bodies need to use that information. They need to gather that information. They need to use it. They need to use it to inform their decision making, and they need to use it in how they target services and how they improve services. And they also need to look at the information governance around all of that information that they have. So there are massive challenges. It's quite a long question that's been posed, and there isn't a short answer for it. But there's lots of different bits of it that kind of feed into this discussion around governance. So I think we could probably have a session on that one question, actually. So do forgive me for being a bit superficial.
Dyfrig is going to probably say to me now that we had a seminar back in January of last year on Dare to Share. So can we make sure that we share information in relation to that, because that captures exactly what you're talking about and some of the challenges that people are facing in terms of collecting the data and in terms of information governance. So Dare to Share, Dev, if that's okay. We've had a great observation in panel members. I have to read it out, and I've got a big smile on my face when I read this. I think we can learn from those organisations that practice management by method over management by objective. Any thoughts on that one? I'll just read it out again, because I think we can learn from those organisations that practice management by method over management by objective. Now then, that's a Zen-like moment we're having there.
It is.
I'll let that one float around for a minute, because I'm aware we've got quite a few more questions coming in. Thank you for your questions, folks. I love challenge the panel. They'll shoot me afterwards, but that's what I'm here for. Okay, there's a couple of questions coming in about sort of, Ross, it's for you. Do you think it's possible to impose public sector governance on arm's length bodies without significantly increasing cost and stifling innovation? So I'll read it once again. Do you think it's possible to impose public sector governance on arm's length bodies without significantly increasing costs and stifling innovation? So there's two elements to that, but the cost and innovation.
Indeed. And actually, what do you want to do in this arena? You want to get a balance of maintaining public sector objectives and principles, but while encouraging innovation and efficiency and all the good things that sometimes the private sector does do well. I think the answer is yes, it is possible, but it requires a change in mindset and a change in how you do this. Because the answer isn't more rules or a more detailed set of regulations or more committees or more boards. It's actually ensuring that we have the right people undertaking the governance with the right experience so they can exercise judgment on the sort of issues that will come up. You can't legislate for everything. The unexpected will happen, particularly in these long-term PPP type contracts. The world will change. What you need to ensure is that the people involved in the oversight and governance can understand thoroughly what the underlying objectives are and can think intelligently about how to use the relationship to best deliver and serve those objectives while ensuring that it's a successful relationship for everybody.
Ross, there's a supplementary come through on that one in terms of, why just leave it at sort of arm's length bodies? Yeah. Well, surely we should be expecting the same standards from private sectors who do business with public sector. So, fair comment.
Well, I think at the one level, if the standards are principle-based standards,
okay.
and they don't obviously come into conflict, for example, company directors have a duty to ensure the long-term health and do the best they can for their company. But setting aside those sort of legislative conflicts, actually, I think as long as we're talking principles, yes.
Okay.
If we get to the point where we're trying to apply all the current body of rules and regulations, managing public money, all that good stuff to a commercial organization, you will necessarily impose a huge weight of regulation on it that will essentially take away its agility and its ability to innovate and its ability to be efficient. And somewhere between those two extremes, you've got to strike the right balance. And that depends a little bit on the nature of the relationship you're entering into.
I can see both Alistair and David nodding on responding to that. Guys, is there anything else you want to add on to that, to what Ross has just said before we move on?
Only that when I talk to non-execs on boards of private companies, I refer to Ross, he's much closer to this time, but they seem to have just the same values and approach for their companies that we do in the public sector. It's a myth that the private sector are a bunch of bandits and robbers. They too need standards.
Okay, lovely. Right. Okay, folks, I'm conscious of time. I need to move on to the third question, but I'm aware we're having lots of questions about culture and WFG and year-end stuff. I'm not ignoring you. I'm going to hold that question if we've got time at the end. Otherwise, I will pose the question to the panel but we'll capture it on blog if that's okay. Right, gents, the third and final question. Okay. We've got a couple of other observations coming through as well. I'll hopefully share them with you as well. So, we've shared a lot of information this morning, and I appreciate this is a first in a series of webinars. This is starting off because this webinar, hoping for a response from you folks in terms of where you want to go next. Given what you've said this morning, right, what's the one fact that public services will be increasingly be delivered services within a range of partners in the future, right? What's the one key piece of advice you would give to public services listening to today's webinars? Before I get you to answer, because we've got two very different type of delegates here. We've got trustees stroke non-execs. We've also got officers. So I'm wanting to make sure that we're helping sort of the different delegate profile we've got here. Happy for you to take different ones and stuff and things like that. But I think it's really important that we share and ensure that the focus, because it's going to be different for non-execs, trustees and stroke officers as well. So David, now that I've just landed that on your plate, are you happy to have a go on that one? Thank you, thanks.
Keep taking them back to the basics.
Okay.
What are we trying to do here? For trustees and boards, it's important that trustees and boards have the training and the induction and skills they need to discharge their role properly. It's important to have clarity about what we're trying to do. Let's keep it simple and get basic things right.
Okay. Before we move on to Ross, is anyone doing anything interesting out there in terms of training, in terms of supporting their board members or non-execs, trustees? If there's any interesting or innovative training approaches, please would you share with us, because we'd love to know more about that. That's a question we get asked quite often, so that'll be really helpful. But our colleagues in Northern Ireland, anything you've got there can help us, please email it to, it'll be lovely, thank you. Okay, Ross, so in two parts, if that's okay with you, is that all right?
Yes, I think certainly with respect to public sector people, particularly engaging in delivering services through other bodies, private sector partners, I think actually the pressing need is for us to equip them better to manage business relationships, and particularly to manage risk. One big difference between the public and private sectors is generally private sector people are trained and then encouraged and rewarded for successfully managing risk, whereas the public sector all too often encourages people to avoid it, and risk can't be avoided.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I think Ross makes some really important points there.
Thank you. Thank you for that, much appreciated. Alistair, I'm going to come to you on this one, if that's okay.
I think it's going in with your eyes open. If you're going into a going back to what David was saying earlier, doing things at arm's length, doing things with the private sector isn't bad, but you need to be clear why you're doing it, what is the added value, what are the benefits to service users and to improving outcomes. What are you getting? What are appropriate profits? What is the balance between risk and reward? How are you going to maintain oversight without being too interventionist? It's those sort of questions. So be clear about what you're doing in advance, and with that clarity, there's less chance of things going wrong.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Alistair. We've got time for 2 more questions that have come in. I think this one's for you. This one's for you, Ross, actually. Looking at the long-term challenges, how should governance models account for long-term challenges? And sorry, let me repeat that again. How should governance models account for long-term challenges and wicked issues in their decision making?
Wicked issues.
I know.
Well, I think it's back to the point. You can't legislate for everything. And actually, your model of governance needs to be able to cope with the unexpected. It's back to the point about risk management. You've got to have the right skills and the right experience around the board or the committee, whichever body is discharging governance, to be able to think through a problem and not necessarily slavishly follow a set of rules, which invariably won't be right, but actually think a little creatively about what the right answer is.
And what's right for your organisation.
Indeed. And not just what's right for your organisation, but what's right at that particular point in time, given the set of circumstances you find yourself in.
Okay, fair point. Thank you. Thanks, Ross. Great response. Thank you. Alistair, can I come to you to round this off?
I think it's thinking ahead, like I was saying earlier, about things like, what happens if costs increase by 10%, 20%? What happens if demand increases or decreases? What does that do to this model of service delivery, to the parent body that's providing funding and oversight, to the arm's length body that's taking care of the delivery? What does all that do? Does it all stack up? And how might things change over time? And does the rationale for doing things at arm's length still exist if things change, to a greater or lesser extent? So think ahead.
Thank you for that. One more question, David, and it's to you. It's about the Sustainable Development Principles. So to what extent should arm's length bodies apply the Sustainable Development Principles when they have the bottom line to think about and their accountability is not to the general public? Good question to end on, David. I'll repeat it for you once again. So to what extent should we expect arm's length bodies to apply the Sustainable Development Principles when they have the bottom line to think about and their accountability is not to the general public?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with the assumption behind the question.
Okay, all right, okay.
Because I think our arm's length bodies are accountable to the public through the ministers,
okay,
and through the Public Accounts Committee. And like the rest of us, it's not just about the bottom line, it's about values in which you do things, as well as actually how you achieve your objectives. We were saying right at the beginning, good governance is about getting things done in accordance with your values. And the Sustainable Development Principles are good practice. This will make us better organisations.
Okay, David, thank you for that. Conscious of time, folks, I'd like to have a chat with you now, the delegates. We're very conscious, right, that today has been the starting point. We've purposely kept it very general, very open and very wide. So where do you want us to go next? Email us and give us your feedback in terms of other specific topics you want us to cover. And it'd be helpful if you have to understand the why bit behind it as well, if there's been some sort of sub-issues going underneath there. So email us those and we'll have a look at them and see if we can sort of pull together a webinar later on in the year. Finally, I think it's really important I need to say thank you to our panel members. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much to you for some great questions this morning. You really kept our speakers on toes, so much appreciated. Dyfrig, Bethan, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi ddau. Thank you very much indeed. Suffice for me to say thank you very much in terms of this morning. We've literally got 1 minute left for Alistair to hand over in terms of next steps, if that's okay. can you add brevity on that one?
I'll do what I can. You've been posing a lot of questions to us, and very often the answers have been, it depends, or we don't know yet, or that's stuff that we still want to discuss with you, we want to hear from you, and that is very much the case. We see ourselves as very much facilitating a discussion. We're not the totality of it, we don't have all of the answers. What we want to do is to establish a community of practice that will help us all to move forward together, to develop understanding, and so there will be further events. We'll be scoping some of those based on what you tell us and things that you've asked us. They're not set in stone. We know we're going to do them, but we don't know exactly what the content's going to be. But there is going to be a theme continuing on, picking up on a lot of these points, and so we'll be continuing to be in touch with you over the coming weeks and months, and we hope that you will be in touch with us too with further questions, your thoughts, your examples of good practice, so that we can keep a dialogue going. That do you?
Lovely, thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi i gyd. Dwi'n Una Lloyd, dwi'n rhan o'r tîm yma fydda yn y Swyddfa Archwilio Cymru. I'm saying thank you, good afternoon. I'm Una Lloyd. We're signing off now on behalf of the Wales Audit Office. Diolch yn fawr i chi.